What's up, guys? It's AG here. So today we're going to be taking a look at my ACC power rankings in a tier list form. Did this a couple days ago with the Big 12. I'll put a link to that at the end of the video. Did pretty well. But essentially, again, it's a power rankings, but in a tier list form. So let's go ahead and break down the categories here. First off, we've got the favorites. So these are going to be the top two teams that I think probably win the ACC championship or have the best chance to make the ACC championship. So the top two teams, basically. Contenders, we're talking everybody that has a legitimate chance, I think, at making a run in the ACC. So probably looking at, your top 5, your top 4, somewhere in that range. Next up, we've got, so you're telling me there's a chance. All right, Lloyd Christmas said it best. What this category is not quite contender, not quite bottom tier, but have a slim margin that if all goes right this season, they could end up sneaking in to that contender status. Then at the bottom, we've got better luck next year. That just means better luck next year. Pretty obvious. Your team's probably not going to be very good this year, so better luck next year. All right, so with that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. These are in no particular order. These are pretty random. I was going to do it alphabetically at first, but I ended up just doing it pretty random. So let's go ahead and start with Clemson. All right, Clemson, as far as a quick breakdown, all right, Dabo, I think they have a pretty talented roster. You got Cade Klubnik back at quarterback, but they didn't bring any transfers. They also lost some key transfers, so I think they're definitely a contender. I think they're too talented not to be a contender, but eventually, and I like Dabo. I think he's a really good head coach. Probably one of the more underrated ones now because he kind of gets crapped on a bunch. But even though they've had a so-called down year these past few years, they've actually been pretty good for a regular team status. But the transfer portal thing is worrisome. He's going to have to adapt eventually. I know he doesn't want to, but you're going to have to bring in transfer portal guys to be able to keep up with these schools eventually. I like, the idea. I think it is won through recruiting for sure. You win that way, but you got to add some key pieces through the transfer portal. Like they lost the starting safety to Texas, for example. That a bunch of other starters gone because of the transfer portal. All right, next up we've got Florida State. All right, Florida State, we know what happened last year. All right, really good year. Jordan Travis gets hurt. All right, kind of all goes down the drain after that. You go undefeated, you get left out of the playoff. I think they are contenders. I'm going to see a little bit because there's just so much turnover on this roster that I have a few question marks on how it's going to necessarily mesh. They're definitely talented enough to be a favorite to win the ACC. That's no doubt. But again, they lose so much. But in particular, all right, Marvin Jones Jr. is coming in from Georgia. That's a good transfer there. You got DJ Uiagalelei, former Clemson quarterback, coming in as your quarterback. I think he's the real deal. Not necessarily the most prolific passer, runner, anything, but he's a proven winner. Really good quarterback. He's going to definitely win games at Florida State. And if they can find enough pieces, skill position-wise, so he can get the ball out, so he's got a running back, so he's got receivers, I think Florida State's in pretty good shape here, potentially make a run. All right, next up we've got Georgia Tech. All right, Georgia Tech, a solid year last year, not bad at all for Georgia Tech standards. You've got a really good quarterback, dual threat guy, Haynes King. I'm a real big fan of him. I'm really impressed with him and what he's done. I think they are pretty talented this year, but they have such a tough schedule. I don't know how they go through that unscathed. So I'm going to put them in. So you're telling me there's a chance because I think they're definitely talented enough, like I said, to somehow make a run. But again, if they had a better schedule, I would definitely probably consider them a contender because I think they're going to be pretty dang good. But they just play such a tough schedule. Not even to mention, they're going to play Georgia eventually. So I don't see how this team kind of makes it out with, without having like 6 losses, for example, just because it's so tough. All right, next up we've got SMU. All right, SMU coming over from the American Conference. Really talented team last year. Lost 2 games in the regular season. Being to Oklahoma and to TCU, kept those within 20 points, so they're definitely competitive when it comes to Power 5 schools. Their quarterback is back from last year, Preston Stone. He's going to be an all-ACC kind of guy. They also have loaded up in the transfer portal. I think SMU is probably going to be legit this year. I'm going to throw them in contender status. They're much closer to, so you're telling me there's a chance than these other 2 teams are. But I think they have a legitimate shot here. Now, schedule-wise, right now, I think I've got them losing about 2 games. I have them in my preseason top 25. I've got them losing to Florida State and a team we'll talk about later. But again, this roster is so talented for a team that is coming over from the G5. Now, the transfer portal kind of makes that possible. Beforehand, it would take years to get your roster from a G5 standpoint to a Power 5 standpoint, and you were going to struggle at first. But SMU is really talented. Not only Preston Stone, but the tight end RJ Maryland. He's an All-American candidate, I think, in my opinion. And I think they're going to be really talented. Not only did they load up skill position-wise, but they brought in a lot of Power 5 O-linemen and D-linemen, which is going to help you compete automatically. All right, next up we've got North Carolina. Mack Brown, all right, you lose Drake May. You've got Omarion Hampton coming back at running back, one of the best running backs in the country. Unfortunately, I don't think he has a lot of help. Talking about Hampton, and Mack Brown might be on the way out. It's not looking good. I'm going to put them in better luck next year. I don't think they're going to be very good this year. You got to find a quarterback, and you've got to improve that defense. Those are the main two things there. You know you've got the running back with Hampton. He's a pretty good dual threat guy. But can you find a quarterback? Can you find your defense? Those are the big two things that they need to address. And if not, Mack Brown might be done after this year. Not only is he pretty old, but they just haven't had as much success as you would think, you know, having Drake May at quarterback, for example, and having Hampton. All right, next up, let's go with Louisville. All right, Louisville, really good year last year, made the ACC championship. This is the other team I've got beaten, SMU, by the way, spoiler alert. They're really talented, loaded up in the transfer portal as well, and they brought in running back Penny Boone, top 10 running back production-wise from Toledo, but he transferred out in the spring. All right, rumors are he did that because he got beat out in spring ball, which if so, means they've got a better running back than him on the roster already. And like I said, they have absolutely loaded up in the transfer portal. I'm really impressed by this roster. They're in my top 15 preseason-wise. I think they're legitimate. I'm going to put them in contender. I don't think I can quite put them in favorites yet, but they're definitely up there. As far as ranking-wise, I would probably put them ahead of Clemson, of Florida State, and definitely of SMU. They're definitely this close to favorites, I think, out of that. And we'll get to the two favorites here in a minute. You can probably already tell who it's going to be. But Louisville has loaded up in the portal. That offense should be improved this year. We saw it was a little inept. You know, when they got to Florida State, for example, just looked pretty bad with Plummer at quarterback. But Jeff Brom is a proven winner, and he's going to take Louisville to really good heights, I think. I think they're going to be really good, and they could even be really good this year. You got Tyler Shuck coming in from Texas Tech. And like I said, he loaded up outside in the transfer portal as far as wideouts and stuff is concerned. I think Louisville's going to be really good. All right, next up, Boston College, bringing in Bill O'Brien, former Penn State quarterback, former Penn State head coach. I don't know why I said quarterback there. Former Penn State head coach, former Alabama offense coordinator, former Houston Texans head coach. He's pretty good, I think. I know he kind of got crapped on a little bit at Alabama as the OC, but he's a winner as a head coach. I think he'll do a pretty good job there, and he wants to be there. Now, they've got a quarterback under the name, you might not know him, Thomas Castellanos. The dude is a really good dual threat guy. He can seriously run, and I'm curious to see how that marriage with Bill O'Brien and him goes. I'm going to put them in so you're telling me there's a chance. I'm curious to see how, like I said, Bill O'Brien does at Boston College. That and Castellanos is really impressive. Like I said, his rushing numbers is off the charts for a quarterback. It's kind of unreal. But I'm curious to see how his running ability, how are we going to see his passing ability match with Bill O'Brien's offense. I'm ready to see it work out. All right, next up, let's go with Cal. Cal coming over from the Pac-12. All right, Pac-12 is done. Them and Stanford come over. We'll get Stanford a little later. Now, of the teams coming in, I think SMU, of those three teams coming into the ACC, is the best right now. But Cal actually has a fairly talented roster. I don't think it's probably going to happen, but we're going to throw them in, so you're telling me there's a chance. I think they're much more closer to better luck next year than these other two teams, but they've got a running back by the name of Jaden Ott. He's really good. He's a top 10 running back in the nation. They've got quarterback Chandler Rogers coming over from North Texas. He puts up some really good stats. This offense, I think, is going to be good enough that they could put up some points and kind of upset some of the teams above them. Now, will it happen? I don't know. That's why I got them, and so you're telling me there's a chance. I don't think it's going to happen, but there is a chance. That's kind of what I'm getting at here. All right, next up we've got Miami. All right, Mario Cristobal, kind of up and down, man. Like last year, you look at how close they were. Like go look at their schedule last year. Look how close they were in games, like against Florida State, for example. Look how close they were to winning the game. Go look at, well, heck, we know what happened against Georgia Tech. All right, the nil-down issue. If they nail the ball there, they win that game. Is what I'm getting at here, like even A&M. What I'm getting at is they were this close to having a really good record last year and being really good. I think they're a favorite this year. I know Mario Cristobal hasn't got it done there just yet, but he's killed it in the transfer portal this year. You got Damian Martinez, running back from Oregon State, coming over, but the big guy is Cam Ward, coming over from Washington State, and I'm curious to see how it's going to work there. I think it really is going to pan out. Cam Ward's a legitimate guy, dual threat quarterback, really impressive stuff he can do. And Mario Cristobal has won big before, think back to Oregon, and I think this is his most talented team yet. I think both at Oregon and Miami, I think this is his best team yet, Mario Cristobal. I've got them in my top 10 right now, preseason-wise. They're too talented not to win. Like, despite Mario Cristobal maybe having glaring issues, obvious holes as a head coach, which I think is apparent, that's for sure. Like, running the ball against Georgia Tech at the end is just mind-blowing as a coach. But anyways, but they're way too talented not to be good, and I think they're too talented for a questionable head coach to screw it up. They're a favorite for me this year. All right, next we've got Pitt. I want to put them in better luck next year. We're going to go ahead and throw them in there. Pat Narduzzi, I'm a big fan of his, but Pitt just kind of hadn't been very good last year, the past however many years. They kind of had that little run with Kenny Pickett where they kind of had some glimpses, but this past season they were just bad, and I don't see it getting any better with how it's looking right now. All right, next up we have Syracuse. All right, Syracuse brought in some serious talent in the transfer portal this year. Fran Brown coming over as their head coach. All right, former DB's coach at Georgia. All right, one of the best, if not the best, recruiters in the nation as an assistant. That was kind of what he was heralded as. And they have loaded up as far as talent-wise. This is the most talented roster Syracuse might have ever had. They brought in guys. He brought in guys from Georgia. He brought in other guys skill position-wise from Power 5 schools. You bring in Kyle McCord from Ohio State. So that's Ohio State's starting quarterback, which was a top 5 team last year, arguably. Top 10 for sure. Top 6 for sure. You bring in Kyle McCord, and in what realm before the transfer portal and before this would we have thought to ever have the words Ohio State starting quarterback transferred to Syracuse? Like, that would have never been a thought that would happen, but it's happened. And I'm really intrigued, I guess, to see how this happens, how it works out. Because talent-wise, this is a top 25 roster. But Fran Brown has not been a head coach. All right, so how is that going to work? We know he can get talent. And like I said with Miami, that's half the battle. As a head coach, you want to get the talent in the door and then not mess it up is your goal there. They've got the talent. Now, year one, it's obviously a stepping stone. You can't probably win it all year one. But I'm going to put them in so you're telling me there's a chance. Like I said, I think this is a top 25 talented roster. They don't have the easiest schedule, but they do have a fairly manageable schedule to where if somehow they beat some of the teams, like they could somehow wind up in the ACC championship, no doubt. But I think Syracuse is talented enough to play with anybody in this conference, what I'm getting at here. All right, next up, let's go with Duke. Duke, all right, lost their head coach, Mike Elko, lost a lot of talent in the transfer portal. Riley Leonard in particular is gone to Notre Dame. But they bring in a questionable hire to me, bring in Manny Diaz as their head coach. Manny Diaz has been a head coach in this conference before at Miami. Didn't work there at Miami, which has more funds, more resources than Duke. So what the heck makes you think it's going to work at Duke? It's not going to, spoiler alert. I'm throwing them better luck next year. Now, they bring in Malik Murphy, quarterback from Texas, had some flashes in the spring game, but kind of looked fairly limited when he did start this past season for Quinn Ewers. So Duke, I don't think is going to be very good. Sorry, guys. All right, next we've got NC State. All right, so if you don't know by now, favorites is probably between NC State and Virginia Tech. Not necessarily saying those are my favorites, but if you're reading this list, it's not going to be the other three. NC State is going to be my other favorite. Dave Doeren, all right, one of the more underrated head coaches in the nation. He probably actually is the most underrated. I said that about somebody earlier, but he actually is. He doesn't get a lot of respect, but what he's done at NC State is super impressive. And this is his most talented team. All right, similar to Miami, they loaded up in the transfer portal, skill position-wise, and they bring in quarterback Grayson McCall from Coastal Carolina. This dude's a proven winner. Think back to COVID. I always make this reference with him. Think back to COVID when Coastal Carolina and BYU had that kind of main event group of 5 championship almost in the middle of the season. They scheduled each other because they both dropped games and had to pick them up. Both of them were undefeated or whatever at that time. Grayson McCall was the quarterback back then. He's still around because of the COVID year, because of the transfer portal rules. He transfers to NC State. They've got a proven winner at quarterback, a guy that can do it all. I think NC State is the favorite, actually, in the ACC right now. As of right now, if you had to ask me, I'm saying they're the representative out of the ACC in the college football playoff this year. I have them ranked the highest right now in my preseason top 25 out of all ACC teams. I think NC State's going to be legit. All right, we've got 4 teams left here. Stanford, I'm going to throw them better luck next year. This is not the Stanford of old. Not too long ago, Stanford had Christian McCaffrey, Andrew Luck, Toby Gerhart. That was the name I couldn't think of. My bad. It's not the same. They're with the transfer portal, with NIL, kind of makes it a little difficult on Stanford because they've got such academic requirements that kind of limits their pool here. So Stanford, better luck next year. I don't know how it's going to improve with NIL. They're probably going to be at the bottom for a while. All right, next we've got Virginia Tech. All right, Virginia Tech, solid year last year. Bring back a ton of production from last year, and they actually have a really manageable schedule. I'm throwing them in the contenders. Now, if you were to ask me about the strength of this team, I would probably put them towards the bottom of the contender list, but their schedule is good enough that they could easily somehow sneak into that ACC championship. Kyron Jones, their quarterback, really impressive stuff. He's really good. Let me get a drink here before I continue. I'm losing my voice. All right, sorry about that, guys. I wouldn't be able to finish the video if I tried without any water. Virginia Tech, though, is talented enough. They return enough guys from, like I said, a pretty good year last year that they're going to be in a lot of people's top 25. So I've got them right outside right now. I think I've got them like in my top 30 at the moment. But they're definitely really close to being a favorite with the way their schedule works out. I think they're in good shape. All right, spoiler alert, these last 2 teams, going to throw them better luck next year. Virginia, Tony Elliott just hasn't got it done. I think this is probably his last year there. And then Wake Forest, they've had flashes like in years past. Think back when they had Sam Hartman, Notre Dame's quarterback last year. But the Demon Deacons, I just don't see it happening this year. I don't think they'll be very good. They don't have a talented enough roster. All right, so to recap, in my favorites, I have Miami and NC State. Those are my top 2 teams right now. In the ACC, contenders, I have Clemson, Florida State, SMU, Louisville, and Virginia Tech. If I were to order those as far as actually being a favorite, I would probably say Louisville, Clemson, Florida State, Virginia Tech, SMU. I think Virginia Tech that's far as like actually playing each other, but Virginia Tech, as far as their schedule works, I would probably move them to the front almost. So you're telling me there's a chance. We've got Georgia Tech, Boston College, Cal, Syracuse. Now, Georgia Tech, I think, is the best of these teams, but their schedule is pretty tough. So again, I don't think it'll happen for them. If one of these teams was to somehow make a run, I think it would be Syracuse. Like I said, they're just so talented that I think they could legitimately make a run, and they have a pretty favorable schedule as well. Then better luck next year. We have North Carolina, Pitt, Duke, Stanford, Virginia, and Wake Forest. Yeah, they're all staying on there. I don't see any of them moving up. But those are my rankings. Let me know yours if you want to even do it as far as these tiers. Go ahead and do that down in the comment section as well. Like I said, I'll put a link to my Big 12 video at the end of this video. But let me know your power rankings in the ACC down in the comment section. Comment down below. Make sure to like this video. And most importantly, subscribe.